We discuss through briefings and training for in-flight emergencies all the time. But have you ever really thought about what you would do in the event of a real emergency or crash landing? Once you're on the ground, what are you going to do? Do you have enough food and water? For you, for your passengers? Do you know how to operate the ELT or the EPIRB? Well, stick around because in this episode, I'm going to discuss all that and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 7640, 95 Mallow, 7 PRB with altitude.
Coordinating, Halen, I'm running bank, balance, bank pressure rolling at 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. Stand by, start 9000, 1013, KFI 25.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 183 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host Trent Robinson and again, thank you for joining me. Well, I'm back from holidays. Sorry, I was hoping to get one in last week, but I was just too tired getting in at midnight as we tend to do here in Darwin and then straight into a Monday morning. And you would have probably noticed a bit of a minimal presence online as well because I haven't even had time to really do many posts either. But a great week flying, working with some pilots from a local airline up here, Air North, and working through their South African instructor rating conversions. And another full week coming up this week as well with IPCs, OPCs, line checks. So I'm probably going to be needing some more leave very, very soon. But one post you may have noticed I did in the story a little while ago was a teaser for a great new product, which is being released in December, due for shipping. And that product is a new flight bag by Nav & Co, which is a flight bag light. It's just 900 grams, fleece lined, iPad pockets, headset storage. It's got waterproof bottom and organized internal storage for all your pens, fuel drains and everything else. And had the privilege to help design this bag. And it's looking absolutely fantastic. Mine has just arrived. I haven't even opened it yet. I'm waiting to do a special unboxing video this week, which I will launch very, very soon. But to celebrate my involvement in the design and the launch and to help you guys, I've organized a special code, which will get you $10 off your purchase price using the code FTAPODCAST, which is the same code you can also use for the pilot logbook that I also have a program there for as well. So this is due for pre-order, due for shipping in December. And you can check out the bag, have a look at some photos and how it all works and everything else on the website. That'll be linked in the episode notes and also the details on the coupon code. But make sure you use that code FTA Podcast. Check it out and get in quick because they will go fast. There's a larger Big Brother bag as well that's also available with a few other products there. So check it out. All designed here in Australia, Australian company out of Perth. And it is just fantastic. This particular bag has been specifically designed to fit in 210s and light twins, basically under your legs. So everything's neat and tidy there, just in front of the seat and keeping out of the way of everybody else. I think you're going to absolutely love it. I'm really looking forward to having a really good look through it this week, and I'll be doing that online. So keep an eye out for that. All right. But I had a wonderful time in Tasmania. I don't know if you guys have ever been there before. And some of you are going, yeah, idiot, I live there. But it was my first time exploring. I first landed at Cambridge and Launceston back in, I think it's about 2008 or 9, somewhere around there. But it was an in and out affair. I landed in the late afternoon, went into Hobart somewhere for dinner, and then off to Launceston the next day. So I got to see a little bit, but we're very keen to explore. We went down for the RAAA conference, which is the Regional Aviation Association of Australia. They had a fantastic conference down there where we had some really informative and really good presentations from CASA Air Services, Bureau of Met. Had a look at a presentation from helicopter operations through Antarctica. It was just absolutely fascinating. And, of course, all the beneficial networking opportunities of bringing people from all throughout industry together and also talking about the Fair Work case that's currently going before the commission, and to do with the duty and standby time and all that, which I did talk to you guys about. I was going to find out. I'm not going to report on that in this episode, but I'm going to cover that off next episode. So I'll let you know where things are at with that. And that is going before the commission right now. It's already a few days in. So we'll see what goes on there. But yeah, a beautiful place. Barely scratched the surface, but despite expecting to see some snow in the distance, we actually ended up right in the middle of it. And it turned out Tassie had a bit of late snow and is still having some snow. There's several meters deep the other day at some locations up in Mount Field and other places there, which is just awesome. So my wife and I had an absolute ball, acting like absolute kids, having snow fights and making snow angels and things. But it did, make us think about the safety of it all, driving on potentially icy roads, not conditions that I'm certainly used to. Used to wet roads, but not necessarily cold, icy ones. And walking around Cradle Mountain, what an absolutely stunning location, beautiful place. But, we had a reasonable amount of gear. We had appropriate shoes and water-resistant pants and jackets and gloves and beanies and everything else, which you may have seen. But we were certainly still not ready for the whole thing, which is getting feet really wet and dealing with snow. Because, of course, if you're walking through snow, your feet are going to get even more wet. Snow is going to get in to your shoes, your socks, etc., if you haven't got the appropriate footwear. And, warning signs everywhere about survival and things and the risk of getting caught out. And as it turned out, just 2 days later after we were there, sadly, a tourist lost their life on the very tracks we were walking and exploring. And then just a few days ago, another Queensland couple set off an EPIRB and called for help, where they sort of started getting in above their means, which at least, they had the gear and were able to be rescued, which was really good news. But it got me thinking about what we teach in flight training, and it's generally pretty limited, I'd say. I know from the questions and scenarios that I set for students and pilots I fly with, it isn't really something they've spent a lot of time thinking about, even from the most simplest things of life jackets, not to mention EPIRBs and ELTs and life rafts or other equipment that you might need, let alone what do you do once you're on the ground. I mean, let's face it, we live in a pretty safe industry, good, safe, well-maintained aircraft for the most part, but we teach the forced landing, but then what? I'll meet you at the back. Okay, great. Okay, we're now down the back of the airplane. Now what? All right, are you prepared? So I don't think it takes a rocket scientist amongst us to realize that, when we're flying in Australia and really anywhere in the world, it can take us over some really remote, unforgiving environments. All right, from deserts to Central Australia, we've got dense rainforests in the tropics, and even in through Tasmania. It doesn't have to be tropical. Dense wooded forests, rugged alpine areas like Tassie's Cradle Mountain there. Weather and terrain can change dramatically in just a few hours, and I was witness to that. We joke about Melbourne and Victoria having 4 seasons in one day. Well, Tassie at the time of there was very similar, and in different locations with exposure to the wind and sheltered from the mountains can be very, very different in within a couple of kilometres. So most times flights end safely, but accidents, forced landings, crash landings can happen. And I don't know about you guys, but it just sucked to survive a plane crash and then die from exposure or lack of thirst lack of water, die of thirst, because we weren't appropriately equipped with the equipment that we needed. And in the ERSA, we do have an emergency section, which is basically an extract from the military manuals there. But survival training is not just for military pilots, okay? It's a key part of what we do as well. And as I said, ask any pilot around, most of them will never have been in this situation, and thank goodness. But it is something that we do want to just think about and consider, because being armed with that knowledge, it can't do anything but help us that, God forbid, one day it may just come in handy. So let's have a bit of a look at some of the things we can do to look at what we need to do to survive whilst we are waiting for rescue. Now, CASA rules and regs, CSRs, Part 91, you'll find Section 270 there, emergency equipment, carriage of survival equipment when operating over water, remote areas, or at night time. We've got there's a cap there on Advice Cap 9102. There's the emergency section, and obviously the other various regs through Part 91, 135, Part 121, etc. on the carriage of survival equipment being EPIRBs, ELTs, life jackets, life rafts, etc. All right, now they're not going to necessarily spell out every single scenario and every single detail, but it will give you an idea of what your obligations are and what needs to be carried, including things like first aid kits. But before I get into that, the other thing we want to just consider, which a lot of pilots coming up to the territory aren't very familiar with, is designated remote areas. Now, designated remote areas are not a Darwin thing. They are, the designated remote area in Australia covers a lot of Australia, including the mountains down through New South Wales and Victoria stretch there, but mostly Western Australia, Northern South Australia, Northern Territory and Queensland. These areas are remote. They are devoid of emergency services, I guess is thing, rescue choppers and all that sort of stuff. So waiting for help could take some time. All right. Now, these regions are lacking in communications, VHF communications, phone communications as well. And accurate weather information as well could also be a contributing part to these zones, which, could get into trouble if you're not careful. So having the right survival equipment for each occupant on board the aircraft is crucial. Now, once you get into these areas, you remember it is remote from help and assistance, not necessarily desert and nothing to see. As I said, forests, mountains, very inaccessible areas can also factor in here. Now, Darwin is a little bit unique, I guess, because there is the remoteness, but there is also a population base that within 50 miles of Darwin, there is an exclusion area where you don't need to carry all that gear and equipment. But once you go outside of that, unless you're in the little area along the Stewart Highway there, extending basically from Darwin, the only road out of Darwin is the Stewart Highway, which goes down through Pine Creek, down through into Katherine there, southbound. Outside of that, you're in the remote area and you need to carry appropriate equipment. Now, what equipment do you need to carry? Well, it used to be a certain amount of food and a certain amount of water per person per day of anticipated rescue. Now it effectively is whatever you feel you need to survive for the expected time that you'll need to await rescue. Now, if you're flying in the top part of the Northern Territory, i.e. the top end, we do have Care Flight. We do have the Care Flight Rescue Chopper, but they can be limited in fuel and range. And so you could be going, potentially 12 to 24 hours without rescue. If you think about when the accident may happen, it could be late into the day. Searching at night time is going to be extremely limited and extremely difficult. So you may well be spending a whole night and into the next part of the day before you are found. So 24 hours, I think, would probably be the minimum that you would want to be considering carrying appropriate food and rations for if you are flying in these areas. The main thing is, I can tell you just from flying and doing flight training and blowing a bloody tyre, you can be stranded for a few hours. And if you've just brought enough water for the flight of an hour and a half, well, now that's just a few hours extra. There's enough to leave you pretty damn thirsty, I can tell you from personal experience. So definitely something you really want to think about. Now, the priorities of survival are the rule of threes. So a good way to think about it is 3 minutes survive without air. 3 hours, we can survive without shelter. Right? 3 days without water. 3 weeks without food. Outside of that, we're in trouble. All right. Now, I would hope that it wouldn't be any more than a couple of days. That would be a very extreme case. But hey, some aircraft have gone down and are yet to be found in dense woodland and all that. So, won't go to the extreme sense, but I think, like I said, the 24-hour rule is definitely a period that we want to be suitably equipped for. So once you've survived that initial landing, we assume that we're going to have air. We're not going to be in a drowning situation. So then it's shelter. It's exposure that's going to kill you fastest, be it in heat or cold. All right. So shelter and warmth are the first priority. If you ever watch those shows Alone and that sort of thing, that's what they always do. They go out there and they build their shelter first for the most part. So the different environments and challenges we do, if you've had a SAR time and you've said that you're carrying emergency equipment, it will ask you what sort of equipment have you got. And, there's sort of alpine cold weather conditions, desert, arid, jungle, forest, maritime water, and the like. So if you are in the cold weather, alpine kind of conditions, then hypothermia is obviously the biggest risk. So hypothermia is exposure to cold and your body temperature dropping. We can survive. The body's pretty amazing, but we start getting down below 30, 31 degrees unless we really get into big trouble. And we're going to need some pretty serious help if we're going to survive. All right, so even temperatures just above zero can be fatal. And I can tell you, adding wetness and wind to that can really be problematic. So staying dry, insulating yourself from the ground, sitting on something rather than on the cold ground, creating a shelter, and providing heat from something if you can, and minimizing your movement of using moisture, heat, as well. You might feel like you're staying warm, but you're also burning energy. In these sort of environments, you definitely want something like a thermal blanket, which is going to help insulate yourself, waterproof matches, or a lighter. We do need to be careful with dangerous goods and things, and lighters in the carriage on our person rather than just sitting somewhere in a box. And obviously appropriate clothing. Might just go out in a t-shirt because we can put the heater on. But what if we had to spend some time outside? So having a jumper or a jacket would definitely be a wise move. All right, but cold isn't just limited to these sort of areas. We can go to the desert where we always think of heat and dehydration, and 100% a problem during the day. But at night time, you only have to go to Central Australia, head into Alice Springs, and there's not snow, but certainly frost and ice. It can get bitterly cold in the desert at night. So we've got both conditions or both extremes here that we need to deal with. So staying with the aircraft to provide shade, definitely something if you're not where there's other shade available. The whole staying with the aircraft thing is multifaceted, I guess. A is shelter, but B for visibility. Right, it's going to be much easier for rescuers to spot an aircraft rather than an individual walking through the desert. Conserve sweat, not water. So again, stay in the shade, rest during the heat in the daytime. If you must move, then try and do that at nighttime if you can. But ideally, yeah, that's a big call to make, and one that you'll have to decide on should you be in that situation. As far as water is concerned, the general rule of thumb is always 3 to 4 litres of water per person per day in normal conditions. If you're going to be in a desert environment, then, that's quite a bit of water to carry. Now, I know a lot of aircraft carry water rations and that sort of stuff, but it's just some jug of water that has been put in the aircraft, and that's wonderful. That meets the requirements, sure. But I can tell you now that that jug of water has been sitting in the aeroplane for God knows how long, and it's heated up and cooled down and heated up and cooled down. It's going to taste like plastic. It's probably bred God knows what else, bacteria and stuff in that water now, and is probably not fit for human consumption. So if you do have water like that sitting around, ideally it wants to be brought back in each day. Yes, that's a pain in the butt, but otherwise it needs to be rotated because, you only need to need it once for it to not be a good situation. So just consider that as well. Jungle, forest conditions, again, obviously dense vegetation is going to make rescue really, really difficult. These sort of areas are then going to have insects, snakes, disease, yes, but that's probably a bit extreme, more long-term situation. But again, shelter, need to stay dry, avoid exposure. We can use smoke from a fire to signal from rescuers in most of these situations. All right, but again, trying to move, navigation on foot can be incredibly difficult. There have been situations with aircraft that have crashed in these environments, and it's taken a long time for rescuers to get to them as well. So the last thing you want to do is leave the crash site that gets located, not be able to find you, and then not know which way to go. If you do need to leave the aircraft, then leaving a note or something else, giving an indication of which way you've gone and when you did leave, will certainly help them work out where you've gone based on the average speed that you're likely to move. That'll be able to give them a search radius of how far away you've most likely managed to get, and help them sort of jump ahead and find you. Water ditchings. I did quite a bit of talking about ditching in episode 21 and 22. If you haven't listened to those, definitely well worth a listen. But then we move into life jackets and trying to stay afloat. All right. So a lot of pilots don't get to use life jackets, haven't been briefed on life jackets. And again, just knowing how they operate, how they work, it's not particularly difficult or challenging, but misuse can lead to disaster if you're not careful. Right, the use of EPIRBs and PLBs, if it's a fixed ELT to the aircraft, then it's going to be going down with the aircraft. If it's a removable one, a personal locator beacon or anything, I know some pilots who do a lot of overwater flight have a fixed ELT in the aircraft, but they also have a personal one as well. So they have to leave the airplane. It's attached to them and not the aircraft, and they're going to be able to be found. For longer overwater flights, and of course life rafts and all that sort of thing are available, and they will have survival kits in them as well with mirrors, dye markers, flares, all that sort of stuff. Special kind of flares, not the standard ones because we can't carry those on board aircraft as incendiary devices, but we've got them in the Mallard, and I know other aircraft there that are sort of a firing pin mechanism style that can be carried and fire up a flare in the sky to attract attention. But again, we come back to our old mate hypothermia there in cold water. Dehydration, again, because we're losing massive amounts of heat out of our groin, our armpits, out of our heads. So again, we can have a look at the guidance material and things there, and you'll see the things like the huddle position and gathering up with other survivors as well to create a heat pocket amongst yourselves and help keep warm, especially if it's going to be something like overnight as well. There's a big risk of getting separated from the wreckage. If you can stay with it, as we said, we want to do that. But otherwise, then once it's gone down, disorientation, everything just looks blue. If you're out to sea a bit, you're going to really struggle with where you are and where it's going. So the decision to try and swim to get help, you need to be really, really sure which way help is going to be and which way land is. All right, so there's a few areas there, and definitely encourage you to have a bit of a think about your main area of flying and the conditions that you're in and the sort of equipment that you need to have on board. But, a basic survival kit and having equipment on board is always wise. So having ELT or a PLB EPIRB, etc. So just a personal locator beacon. Make sure that they are registered and in date, batteries working, all that sort of stuff, and you can test them as well. So typically, the common rule of thumb is to do a test at the top or bottom of the hour, on the hour or half past the hour, and fire it off for a couple of seconds and then turn it back off again. Sufficient water, as we said, for everybody. Water purification tablets if you think you might need or be in a situation where you need that. Thermal blankets, tarps, ponchos for shelter. Fire starting tools. Again, got to be careful of what we can and can't carry on board an aircraft because of dangerous goods there. A knife or multi-tool, all right, really, really useful. Good old Leatherman can do a lot of things. Sometimes it's just to tighten up a couple of loose fasteners or screws on the cowling. At other times, in that situation, it could really be incredibly handy to have. First aid kit, make sure you know how to use it too. I know everyone can generally apply a Band-Aid, but other things, do a first aid course. You don't need to do it necessarily to get a job, but it can be potentially life-saving skills, and you'll be bloody glad you did it. All right, signaling equipment, a mirror, whistle, strobe, high-vis cloth, all that sort of stuff. Little signaling mirrors with a little hole in it, so you can aim it at aircraft is what got used last year, and there was a crash landing and ejection during pitch black, and the pilot signaled the rescue chopper with his mirror. So they do work, all right, but they do take a little bit of time. I've had to play with one on just getting the flash right and practicing how to use it. So again, if you've never used one before, see if you can find one and have a play with it beforehand, just to really understand it. Flash it against something on the ground, and you'll see what I mean. It just takes a little bit to get it going where you want. But all equipment that is available, but if you're going to have the equipment, know how to use it. All right, and then of course basic rations. So just something that's going to get you through. Again, we can go a fair way without food, and hopefully we're only really talking about maximum 24 hours here, but nice to have it anyway. All right. Just one other note on ELTs as well. Just remember, so a fixed ELT is one that is fixed to the aircraft and crash activated. Those ones were very, very common back in the day, but then the frequencies changed and the satellite-based ones came into play. And now a lot of aircraft only carry the little portable ones, which are not crash activated. So you definitely want to grab that out of the glove box or behind the seat, wherever it is, know where it is, and chuck it down your shirt or attach it to yourself or something else, or just activate it before you do your landing, just in case it doesn't go to plan, because you may be not capable of firing it off later. And those ones, like I said, will not activate themselves. From HSB examinations, I found about 40 to 60% of fixed ELTs actually did go off. That was at a Australian Flying magazine, trying to find some stats. But incorrect installation, damage during impact, battery failure, or the antenna disconnecting. Okay, and that was certainly the case of the last horrible fatal accident up here in the Territory a couple of years ago, where the aircraft crashed, the 210, just during the wet season there, and the ELT did go off, but it completely tore off from the antenna. And so it wasn't until the rescue chopper was virtually overhead and found it more visually than by the ELT signal that it actually picked up the beacon, because it just had nothing to throw that signal out. All right, so they're there. They're a safety tool, but even when they're carried, they're not guaranteed to function properly under all conditions. They're certainly not as sort of robust and durable as a black box, etc. All right, so the most important thing to remember is the survival mindset and your attitude. All right, so the biggest thing you must do is stay calm. All right, panic, it doesn't help anybody. It wastes energy and it clouds your judgment. All right, so take stock of the situation, assess everybody, apply first aid, check your supplies, make sure everything is removed from the aircraft that needs to be in case it's on fire or it's going to go down in the water situation. Work out your location, your weather, how much daylight you've got left. And, of course, like I said, prioritize first aid, then shelter, fire if you can, water, food, and then signaling for help. I'm sure you've all seen those movies where the plane's already flying past and they desperately fire their one and only flare, only for, of course, nothing to happen because no one saw it. So, again, think about that as well. All right, and then stay visible. So if you can, stay with the wreckage. Smoke signals, mirrors, EPIRBs, and if you want to make a smoke fire, you can have a normal fire and get lots of green material on it. That's going to smoke up the most. That'll make big grey smoke. If you want black smoke, well, then usually something artificial. So aeroplane seat or fuel, that sort of stuff. That's all going to burn pretty thick black, and that obviously will also stand out quite well. But remember, aviation accidents, if you go down, you've got a Mayday out, you've got an ELT fired off, you will be searched for. Your SAR time will expire. You don't respond and no one can see your airplane parked up and tied up on the flight line. You will be searched for. So stay calm, take stock, prioritize, stay visible. All right. I hope that all gives you some things to think about and consider. Again, a bit of a morbid topic, I guess, but it is something that we should think about and consider just in case, because I can tell you now those skills are where people will survive, and without them, it could be the difference. So stay safe and always be prepared. All right, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been of use, and I very much look forward to talking to you again next week. In the meantime, don't forget to check out the Nav & Co special $10 off pre-launch discount, again due for shipping in December, and I'll have a video up during the week on the socials as well, showing you all about it. And if you like to reach out, got something you'd like me to talk about or anything else, flick me an email. All the details are in the episode notes. Until then, take care, stay safe, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.